There's a rumor that dies hard in Detroit, whispered in engineering break rooms for almost 2 decades, that somewhere in a locked design vault, a GTO never officially left, not canceled, just paused, waiting for an engine architecture good enough to deserve the name again. That rumor turned out to be true, and what emerged from it is sitting under showroom light right now, breathing exhaust heat into the air, like it already knows the argument it's about to start. This is the channel where we don't fall for press releases and marketing poetry, where we look past the badge and ask what a car actually means to the person who buys it. And before anything else gets said about this GTO, one thing needs to be said honestly, because it will define everything that follows. The engineers fought internally over whether this car should even carry a supercharger, or whether the future GTO needed to prove itself with something entirely different under the hood. That argument didn't get settled quietly. It got settled on a dyno, and the result reshapes what a Pontiac muscle car is allowed to feel like in 2027. Look at the face of it first before the engine ever turns over. The quad-lens lighting signature isn't nostalgia dressed up in LEDs. It's a deliberate refusal to smooth this car into the generic aggressive grille template that every performance coupe seems to wear now. The narrow split-nose grille, flanked by those round driving lights, pulls directly from Pontiac's endurance racing lineage, but the proportions have been stretched and lowered until the whole face reads as something meaner, more purposeful, less decorative. The hood scoop isn't a styling cue. Its intake geometry was shaped in a wind tunnel to feed cool, dense air to the top of the engine bay during sustained high-load runs, because Pontiac's engineers understood that if this car couldn't back up its face, it wasn't worth building. Walk around to the flanks, and the story keeps developing. The wide-body fenders aren't there for show either. They exist because the GTO's chassis engineers demanded a wider front and rear track for cornering stability. And rather than hide that requirement, the design team let it become the car's visual signature. The carbon front splitter and side skirts sit low and functional, generating real downforce at speed rather than pretending to. Out back, the ducktail spoiler and quad exhaust outlets, finished in a deep bronze that catches light differently, depending on the hour, complete a rear end that looks less like a modern reinterpretation and more like a challenge issued to every muscle car built in the last decade. Open the door and the character shifts from confrontation to intimacy. The seating position drops you low and center, the way a driver's seat should feel in a car built around a person rather than a spec sheet. The steering wheel is thick-rimmed, wrapped in a leather that's been treated to stay grippy even after hours behind the wheel, with the Pontiac arrowhead mounted dead center like a compass needle. The cabin smells faintly of new leather and something like warm carbon resin, an intentional scent signature the interior team apparently spent real time developing rather than leaving to chance. Ambient lighting traces the door panels and dash in a soft bronze glow at night, calm rather than theatrical. The main touchscreen is angled toward the driver, not the passenger, a small detail that says who this cabin was actually built to serve. Shut the door and road noise drops away almost entirely. The kind of hush that makes you lower your voice without meaning to, because the silence feels earned rather than artificial. Underneath all of that theater sits the decision that split the engineering team in half. Instead of chasing a twin-turbo setup or leaning on electrification the way half the industry has, Pontiac's powertrain group committed to a supercharged V8, internally targeted at somewhere around 850 horsepower and roughly 750 pound-feet of torque, paired to a quick-shifting, dual-clutch transmission and rear-wheel drive as the standard layout. No hybrid assistance, no electric torque fill, nothing softening the character of the engine. That was the controversial call. In an era when nearly every performance brand is hedging its bets with batteries, this GTO chose to stay mechanically honest, betting that the emotional purity of a blown V8 still matters more to the people who'll actually buy it than another half-second on paper. And when that engine actually fires, you understand the bet immediately. Startup is a short mechanical inhale, followed by a deep, chesty bark that settles into an idle with real texture to it, a rhythmic shudder you feel through the seat rails before you've touched the throttle. Roll into the accelerator, and the supercharger whine layers in underneath the exhaust note, rising from a low mechanical hum into something almost feral as revs climb. The exhaust personality is unapologetically loud, without turning into noise for its own sake. Each gear change through the dual-clutch box landing, with a short, percussive snap that you feel in your sternum as much as here. Push it toward the top of the rev range, and the whole car seems to tighten its focus, the cabin isolation falling away just enough to let that mechanical intensity in, reminding you this was built to be felt, not just heard. The first mile confirms what the sound promises. Steering response is quick without being nervous, weighting up naturally as speed builds so the car never feels twitchy at parking lot speeds or vague at triple-digit ones. Throttle response is immediate, the kind of connection that makes the car feel like an extension of your right foot, rather than something translating your input through layers of software. Brake feedback is firm and progressive, giving you real information about how much stopping power is left in reserve. The suspension, tuned with adjustable adaptive dampers, manages to stay composed over broken pavement while still transmitting enough road texture that you never forget you're driving something built for enthusiasts rather than isolated from them. Through the first hard corner, the chassis balance reveals itself as neutral and trustworthy, the wide front track doing exactly the job the engineers intended, letting you carry speed into the apex with a confidence that feels earned rather than electronically manufactured. None of this technology forgets that it needs to live with you every day. Adaptive driver assistance systems handle the tedious parts of long commutes without taking away the parts you actually want. Lane keeping and adaptive cruise stepping in only when you ask them to. Over-the-air updates mean the car's software matures the same way its owner does, quietly improving in the background. The cargo space, while not the GTO's reason for existing, is genuinely usable for a weekend bag or two, and the ride quality in its softer suspension setting makes a 4-hour highway run feel like something you'd choose to do again, rather than something you'd endure. Pricing is expected to land somewhere in the neighborhood of $95,000, positioning it above the mainstream muscle car segment, but well below the exotic coupes it occasionally borrows presence from. That number stops feeling abstract the moment you're back behind the wheel, because what you're really paying for isn't horsepower on a page. It's a manufacturer choosing mechanical honesty over easy hybrid shortcuts, betting an entire model revival on the idea that some cars should still make you feel something raw. That's a harder thing to build than a spec sheet, and it's worth paying for. There is no true rival sitting across the showroom floor from this car. It isn't chasing the electrified Grand Tours, and it isn't simply reviving a badge for nostalgia's sake. It's a legacy nameplate that decided the future of muscle still runs on displacement and supercharger whine, positioning itself as the last honest interpretation of what American performance used to promise before everyone hedged their bets. This car was built for the driver who still believes an engine should have a personality, who wants to feel every gear change rather than simply arrive faster, who cares as much about the sound coming through the firewall as the number on the timing sheet. It's built for someone who understands that true performance isn't measured only in lap times, but in how alive a car makes an ordinary Tuesday evening drive feel. It belongs on an empty stretch of desert highway at sunset, engine note bouncing off nothing but distant rock formations, or threading through midnight city streets, where its presence announces itself before it's even seen. If you've made it this far, you already care about this more than most people do, so subscribe to the car culture and drop your honest take in the comments. Does a modern muscle revival deserve to stay purely mechanical? Or is refusing hybrid assistance in 2027 just stubbornness dressed up as authenticity? Either answer is defensible, and that's exactly the conversation this car was built to start. The 2027 Pontiac GTO doesn't ask to be remembered. It simply refuses to be forgotten.